Welcome to Empire Building, the podcast where we talk about building big businesses and even bigger lives. I'm your co-host, Kimber Lovett-Minkiti.
And I'm Sarah Reynolds. And you got the Virginia girls again.
You did. We're representing, all right? I'm born and raised in Virginia, now living in DC, and Sarah's just down the road from me in Virginia.
Yes. And so we're excited to be here today. And we've got quite the treat for you in terms of the topic about a superpower you didn't know you had. But before we do that, we both just got back from, I believe it's the largest real estate conference in the world
ever.
At this point. Yeah, ever. There were lots of people there.
It was. I'm like, sometimes you're like, how can they jam this many of you guys into 15,000 people squeezed in? So,
into one space.
But it's amazing.
Yes.
It's amazing. Tony Robbins was the keynote, the first keynote, and then we closed the conference with Mel Robbins. And if you don't know Mel Robbins, you need to, right? Because talk about somebody who is living in her superpower of vulnerability and authenticity, and literally something as simple that kind of helped change her life in a really dark period, just this process of how your heart, and she didn't even know it at the time, right? The research in your brain of literally taking that path to action, moving from I need to just get out of bed today, and that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And just go, do it. And what a simple concept that just in her own living and leaning into that vulnerability and a couple of years, right, of not even telling anybody except her husband that she was using this strategy, and then doing a TED Talk that literally, right, changed her life and changed not just hers, but really has changed a world in terms of another one, saving people's lives, helping, just this movement that really was rooted in authenticity and vulnerability.
So true. Ideas are praised, execution is worshipped. And you are such a good executor, Kimber. And you executed the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go right away because you saw Phil Jones, who is a famous author, right? He wrote the book, Exactly What to Say. And you did that. You actually implemented 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you were vulnerable by asking him a question. Tell our listeners about this. This was so cool.
I know. Well, I love our Empire Circle ladies. We have builder groups that really focus on different aspects of their life. And so I've been working with our leadership group. And so we had just met and we're reading his book, right? So his book was a very first book club selection for our session as we all work to grow as leaders. He had presented at the conference because not only did we have Mel and Tony Robbins, who were not married, I should say Tony Robbins and Mel Robbins, not connected, but we also had just had some phenomenal authors, speakers, our breakouts. We had Rory Vaden, right? You had these amazing people who were then just help leading us with the breakouts, hanging out with us all.
We had Kimber Lovett-Minkiti.
Yeah. And Sarah Reynolds.
Yes.
I love it. So I come out of a session and Phil was sitting at the bar where I was debriefing with John Newman, who's my business partner. And I was like, is that Phil, Joe? Is that Phil, 2 people over from us? And he was like, oh my God, it is. And I was like, oh my God, we're doing, telling him the story. And he was like, you should go, go say hi. He was like, I can't believe all these people are here and no one's talking to him. He's just sitting there by himself having a glass of wine. And so I was like, oh, it'd be so great. So he had just taught a class where he kind of talks about re-entry into communication. And so I literally went over and I did the practice that he had just taught in the class of about 1,000 people. And it just was the opener. And we had a whole conversation when I started to tell him that this group of women, and the first thing he said was, I would love to be there. I love book clubs. When is it? But it was literally the very next week. And so he said, well, let's record a video for them. So just something as simple. We ended up with an amazing video from Phil for our Empire Circle ladies. It was great.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what Kimber's talking about is Her Best Life, our amazing organization that focuses on the development of female leaders living their best lives. We have our elite sort of circle, which is called our Empire Circle. And so we have a leadership builder. So these are women in Empire Circle that are focusing on their leadership. And so Kimber immediately did the things that she learned at Family Reunion to then provide more value for our Empire Circle amazing female leaders. And so I love it. It was such a great event.
It was such a great event. And I'm always reminded, while we get so much value in the sessions and classrooms, and I mean, this year was, a new high for that.
Yes.
I still hear constantly, I had a group of agents together last night, that the value that they get at the core is the authentic, armor down conversations and relationships in the hallways, in the hotel lobbies, right? Like in the dinners that they're having. And I think when we started to think about like our topic, this is one for me that honestly, like I, from a perfectionism, like live behind the armor, like it takes a lot for me to put it down. And so vulnerability, I was like, I mean, I love Brené, but I was just like, I don't know. It's not for me. It's just not my thing. I need you to see what I want you to see, and I'm going to hold everything else back. And last 2 years have been some of the most challenging in my life. And what I found that like what I was missing by holding back, right? The experience, the feeling, the emotion, while it does perhaps, right, like push down the ability to experience some of the negative emotion, it also holds you back from experiencing some of the greatest joys. And so I realized like that duality in the season has been super, super powerful. And that's really like what, Brené, who kind of unlocked this world and this movement around vulnerability and authenticity and kind of brought it right to the surface. Really, in our culture, we sometimes think, or, certainly was my world, vulnerability as weakness, right? It was a lot of our language is even that, right? Boys don't cry, suck it up, just tough it out. What she really introduced was like, we avoid these emotions like shame, uncertainty, but vulnerability is also, right, this birthplace of joy, belonging, creativity, authenticity, and love. And so it's been an amazing journey to sort of come into that with a beautiful circle of amazing women. And so we're going to give you a couple practices. So if you might have been like me, where you were like, I don't know, like I both personally or professionally, we know that unlocking that it is actually a superpower.
Yes.
And we want to give you a couple of easy practices that you could put into place that we know will be the first steps to allow you to unlock it and to harness it in your leadership, in your personal, and your life journey.
So good. Oh my goodness. So vulnerability and authenticity, one of the things that I have loved about leading with vulnerability and authenticity is it gives actually everyone around you permission to do the same, right? It's the truest form of being true to ourselves, right? So not having the armor, not just being us, telling the truth, sharing what's going on, right? And it's so powerful because when we do that, others then have permission to do that. So we're going to talk about this superpower. I heard you teach a class, I don't know, it's been probably a couple of years now, on the difference between sort of like feminine leadership and masculine leadership. And this is actually a feminine leadership quality. And that's why in the title, we say it's the superpower you didn't know you had. Feminine and masculine does not mean male and female.
Does not.
Okay.
That's right.
So just be clear, like there are males that have feminine leadership traits and vice versa, right? I have many masculine leadership traits, right? And so like this is considered a feminine in the feminine category of leadership, which is very powerful because it creates such a safe, nurturing space. Okay.
And trust, right? Like you realize a lot of times we hear, well, we need trust. We need our people, our clients, our family, like we need trust. Trust is really like its birthplace is in vulnerability and authenticity. It is the way our ability to connect and to be real about who we are and how we're feeling and being able to express that is actually the fastest way to build and to instill or to rebuild, right? Like that ability to acknowledge maybe when you did something wrong or you fell short. And so if you're looking to go rebuild a relationship, like whether that's a client you haven't talked to in a few years or a personal relationship, it's actually in the vulnerability, in the acknowledgement of self that is the first place to step back into that.
Yeah. When I think about the scariest times in my leadership, but then also the most powerful, it was actually when I truly harnessed vulnerability and being authentic. I can think back to about 6 months ago, we did a panel on being accountable versus victim mindset. So this was for a Cross Empower home. So I want to share an example of using vulnerability. And I think it's important before we get into the sort of like how to practice it more. I want to be vulnerable and authentic and share with our listeners here. So I was really nervous because I had realized that I had become a victim about the market. It had never happened to me before. I got my license in 2006, which was right before the Great Recession. That's when I learned how to help buyers and sellers. And so I always have been made for like a tough market because that's all I knew. But then leading the last year or so, it's been a challenge. And I realized that I had become sort of in my head, allowed myself to become a victim to the market versus taking advantage of the market in terms of the opportunity. I was actually interviewing my mom on her journey of having an accountable mindset versus a vulnerable mindset. And I felt very hypocritical if I did that interview without sharing to the team what I had come to the realization with about myself. So you can imagine my organization is 330 remarkable human beings. We did, 34 million in revenue last year. It's a large company. Okay.
Number one.
Yeah. Number one. Okay. So a large company. Okay. And I'm like, I'm going to get in front of all of these remarkable humans that are trusting their leader and tell them that I failed them and that I have been a victim. And I was going to apologize. I was going to share with them that I'm changing myself and I'm expecting them to change with me, right? That I've allowed for us to have a lot of victim language about the market and we're going to change it. And I was so nervous. My heart was pounding. But I did it. So I stood up and I said, hey guys, like I've got to share my heart for a moment. And I said, I've had this realization and I've let you guys down. I'm supposed to be protecting my mindset. I'm supposed to be the most accountable out of everybody. And yet I allowed for my mindset to blame the market for us not hitting our goals and almost accepted it. And I'm sorry. And I got emotional, just like I'm trying to hold it back right now. But I got emotional. I just said, will you guys forgive me? Because I can't interview my mom right now about this topic without first telling you the truth that I'm struggling here and I've been struggling. And I'm asking you guys to hear her on her journey and learn from it. And so we pivoted to interviewing. I will tell you that that was probably the most powerful meeting we had in 2023. More team members reached out to me, more mindsets were changed. And when I think about it, I didn't think about it until just now, but when I think about it, it was because I led with vulnerability. I was authentic. I told the truth. I was me. And so the power, it's so powerful when we can lead our teams by being vulnerable. When we can share we're not perfect, we mess up. Okay. When we can share our struggles, right? It gives them all permission to do the same. And so I just want to encourage you guys, to lean into this and really listen to this episode. Maybe you're like Kimber and you're like, this isn't for me. Keep listening. Keep listening. Okay.
Yes, please keep listening.
Yes.
And I love that, Sarah, because I do think as a leader, sometimes we think we're supposed to show a certain front always. Like there should be no chink in the armor. One of my amazing leaders that I have the honor of working with in the region of KW is Wendy. And she said to me, I love the time we get together because I don't have to be presidential. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Right? She's like, with my people, I have to be like, everything's great. Right. I have to I have to charge forward. And the answer is back to your masculine fulfillment, Sarah, there's a masculine role, let's go, let's roll. And I think part of that feminine power is being able to say, hey, one, acknowledging when there's been a place that you're learning from or a concern that you have and creating that space. I do think it's been such a powerful gift to say, hey, I don't have it all figured out.
Yep.
I don't, right? Progress over perfection.
Yes.
And that often means we have to go forward, but own when we went a wrong direction.
Yeah. And I think the key there is owning it, but then navigating, okay, this is what we're going to do next, right? So then they're saying, okay, she has changed her mindset and this is how she did it. And this is how we're going to do it too. These are the action steps we're going to take. So, but you lead with that vulnerability and authenticity first.
Yeah. I think when we think that people don't know, and they do, right? So I think sometimes if you had just jumped in, it actually erodes that trust. And sometimes we don't even realize it because we sometimes think that people aren't seeing all the things. And when we actually just say them, because I think for a lot of our cultural time, we just don't say the hard things.
True.
Hard things don't get talked about.
Yeah.
And I think what's so beautiful about this current movement is we actually can say the hard things. We can own it. And I love what you said. It said your expectation of them was to come with you on this next chapter in the journey.
Yep. So what are some practices, right, that we can implement to truly lean into the superpower that you might not know that you have, right? Okay. So practice number 1 is you want to really lean into your strengths. Okay. So every single human being was gifted with strengths. Okay. It's 1 in 94 millionth of a chance that another human being has the same top 10 strengths as you in the same order. meaning that you want to lean in to your strengths, which means that you want to be authentic and vulnerable about what you're really good at and how God has gifted you and what maybe you're have blind spots for. And a lot of times we don't like talking about our blind spots, right? Because that's vulnerable.
And our strengths sometimes, right? Like that's
Yes.
also like, I'm going to like pretend, or I'm going to go. I find this, I mean, raising kids, like you're really good at math, but you're not so good at English. So what do? We go get the English tutor. We don't
Yes.
actually build the muscle that is the thing that you're actually uniquely gifted at. And I think it starts so early. We do it as parents, right? It starts so early that we're taught, go spend all the energy and extra time on the place that's a little bit weaker. And we actually then don't often cultivate the beauty and uniqueness and gift that is your strength. Like that kind of is like, yeah, you got math. That's great. Go over here and really figure out how to do the hard thing. Most of us are successful in business, our listeners, because you actually like stumbled or ran to the thing that you were gifted at. And maybe what's holding you back right now is that you are abandoning the thing that you're not feeding the strength, because you're trying to either do what somebody else, like I should also be doing this. I should also have an ISA to be, I should. And maybe like the answer is no, you should be actually doing exactly what you're amazing at.
Yes. No, that's so powerful. Oh my goodness. So an example of that, right, is one of my top 5 strengths is called significance. Okay. And that allows for me to tie not only my significance to a goal, a mission, it actually allows for me to communicate my people's significance in the mission. And so when I show up as me, God gifted me with the ability to do that, right? When I show up as me, and if I didn't show up authentically and observing how the significance of my people have a role to play, can you imagine the stress that would be on my organization if they didn't know, okay, what's my role in the big mission, right? Well, and so lean in to those strengths. It allows for you to be you. It allows for your team to surround you in the areas also that aren't your thing. And it gives you permission to say, I'm going to own this part. And then you guys, because you're strong in that area, are going to own that part. And when they see you as their leader, leaning into your strengths and really leaning on them with the areas that they're strong in, that then has a literal ripple effect, not even just in your organization, it has a ripple effect at home too, because you're happier, you show up happier, so do they, right? And so leaning in to your strengths is such a key part and practice of showing up authentically and also being vulnerable at the same time.
Sometimes when you understand that, sometimes our natural inclination is to find people in our world who are like us. Like I know I built a team that was very like me. Like we had similar strengths, and that was what I was attracted to. But what the business really needed was actually like the things that I wasn't amazing at. And so that vulnerability to say, hey, like I actually am amazing at like putting my head down and executing and delivering like what the business needs. But it's been great having a new business partner who actually is really good at also projecting out and thinking ahead and like being like, what about these next things? And together we've been able to really create some really exciting business opportunities. But it was, I think, at this phase of my life, recognizing that somebody who had some complementary skill sets that I didn't have was actually a real strength of the business. And like you're saying, owning that for me, being an ability to execute at a high level is actually a strength. And I don't have to like stop trying to feel bad that I wasn't always like creating the vision that was a 10-year vision. I could take a vision and literally bring it to life. That's been a huge part of our business's success.
Yeah. And I mean, that just shows, right? When you show up like that with your business partner and you're sharing, okay, this is what I'm really good at. And you're being authentically you of like, I'm a beast executor. Like, and I'm not the best at seeing the steps to, because I'm in the now, right? I mean, that allows for true team wins and true like impact. It started, right, with Kimber saying, okay, this is authentically me. This is who I am. This is what I'm good at. And then recognizing who they're authentically them. And that's allowed the business partner to own that and be excited because she first was authentic herself. Right. I love that.
Yeah.
So powerful.
I love it. So the first one, right? Like recognizing and embracing and leaning in to your strengths and unique gifts. So the second practice, and I find that for women, right, this is a really challenging practice, which is to start practicing asking for what you need, not what the business needs, not what your family needs, not what you're supposed to be doing, but what's the need that you have. And a lot of us have become numb to some of those just personal needs, right? We talk about white space. We talk about self-care. Like, did you skip lunch this week? Like, right? Did you just miss the thing, right? Because sometimes we actually start to disassociate from our physical like self. And I've asked some of our Empire Circle ladies in the Her Best Life world, I asked a question, a very simple question the last time we were together. What do you want? What do you want this year? And many of us have struggled to answer that. And if you aren't able to answer it, you can't even begin to build a plan and a life that gets you there. And it could start simple. It could start simple and saying like, I want Friday afternoons off. That was it, right? For me, I wanted white space. I wanted to not be scheduled. And one saying it so that my team could help me make that happen. But your want might be professionally. I want to be a speaker teacher. I want to own a different business. I want these things. Then it allows you, one, to say it out loud and to allow other people to help get you there. Whether that means like we talk a lot of times about, particularly for women, they don't go for the next big thing. We have whole episodes on that, right? They don't ask for the opportunity. They don't think they're ready or qualified for the next piece. And because of that, right, because a lot of our male counterparts not only will ask, they'll ask way before they're ready, right? They're like, I'm ready. I know when I had an open leadership, a really high level leadership position, I had 10 men reach out to me, some qualified, some not. And I literally had to go seek out the women who I knew were overqualified, but who didn't think that they could do it. So beginning to just sit with what your needs are is a really powerful practice. Everything from your most basic to things that are, when you start to dream a little bit bigger about, hey, what do I want? What would make me happy? What makes me feel fulfilled?
I'm sort of having an aha right now because I didn't truly understand this practice until right now. Like, I want to explain it a little bit for the listeners, just in case someone's like me, because I'm just having this big aha. So many times in my life, I have not asked for what I want and need. I think back, I was talking to my daughter, Olivia, the other day, and she is loving volleyball. So she started volleyball last year and is like dominating. She's tall. She's got my husband's long arms and huge hands, and she's just loving it. And I said to her, I love that you love volleyball. And I said, I always wanted to play volleyball. I said it to her just like that. And she goes, well, why didn't you, mommy? And I said, I never told anyone that I wanted to play volleyball. And she goes, well, did your school have it? I said, yes. And I would watch the girls play volleyball and I would sit there and say, I want to play volleyball. And I never told anybody. I've been thinking so much lately because there's actually a lot of examples of me not sharing what I want or need. It's actually one of the highest forms of being vulnerable because when we share what we want and need, we can be let down if we don't get it.
Yes.
And I'm just having this big aha, like it was my fear of being vulnerable that made me not share because I didn't want to be let down. And so recognizing that when we need something and when we don't share it, it's actually us not being vulnerable. We're not being true to ourselves out of fear of being let down. But now when I look back, like who was really let down by that, right? Like, because when I look back and I see the joy that I'm seeing my daughter playing this sport that I love, but I never played, I'm like, oh my goodness, I missed out, right? On a big part of my life that I could have had that joy, but it had to start by me asking, what do I want? What do I need? Right? So we want to give you guys permission today to ask for what you want. Ask for what you need. And at times we're not always going to get it, but it starts by asking, and it starts by vocalizing and understanding that we do want and or need that. And what I found is that 90% of the time you actually get it. 90%, you get it.
You do.
Yep.
I think that's why for me too, Sarah, like this, in this path and journey of like really unpacking and unlocking the superpower in my own life, why this one has really stuck out. Because as a mom of 4 boys and a business leader and a daughter, I could tell you what I thought everybody else needed from me. But the question a year ago, stopped me in my tracks because I could not articulate a Kimber want. It's like, what did I want that wasn't tied to giving somebody else what they needed? And it's been like this great journey to unpack. Maybe some of our listeners like me will struggle with that. And I love, Sarah, your example, because thinking back, what is that? Like, or it could be so small. It could be like, I want an hour to myself. Like, I want to read a book a month. Because then you can start to be like, some of these things you're 100% in control of.
Yeah.
And when you help like put it out there, a lot of times your world will conspire to get it for you. And just by making it known, whispering it, saying it out loud, writing it on a vision board, there's real power in the vulnerability to want something, and let yourself go get it. So I like start to write it, to journal it. If you don't have a list, the practice, like put it in your gratitude, like just start to think, what do I want? And that list will start to grow and be bigger and even more powerful.
So true. The third practice is to lean into your support systems, right? So number one, we got to lean into our strengths. Number two, we want to ask what we want and need. And then number three is that we really want to lean in and identify a support system. I mean, now that I'm thinking about this, for my aha from number two, is that, this is another thing. Like, I wanted friendship. I wanted a support system. And I never vocalized it. And if it weren't for Wendy Papasan approaching me about our circle and saying, hey, like, I want you to be part of this, I don't know where I would be, right? And so leaning into a support system and saying, hey, let's follow the practice, and saying, like, I want that. Like, maybe you haven't said out loud that you want friends, that you need to not feel lonely. You need connection, right? So like, first, acknowledge that you want and need it, right? And we give you permission to do that. And then go find it and lean in to that support system. Because what I have found is like, the support system has allowed for me, right? Not allowed for me, but given me the courage, the courage to be authentically Sarah, giving me the courage to be vulnerable and to show up as me, right? I mean, there have been times where I've shared a fear I was having or something I was going through, and one of the females in our circle at Her Best Life looks at me and says, you should share that with your team. You should share that with your people. And then I turn around and I do it. But what triggered it was actually my support system, right? So we are passionate about this on the Empire Building podcast, because our support system has really changed our lives. Yep.
It has. Well, I think about our Her Best Life event, which we have actually coming up this fall. So if you're hearing this and you're like, I need this, then we want to see you in Miami, and check out the show notes. We'll get a link in there. But I think we start every single event with our just like authenticity and vulnerability panel. And when I think about the impact that has, it sets the tone, it takes the armor off, and we do it with often 95% of the women in the room. The women on the stage, they know or know of. And so you get to learn things about them. They take the armor off right there in the room, right at the beginning. Sarah said earlier, it gives permission, invites everybody else to know it's not a conference, right?
Yes.
It is a movement for connection,
Yes.
for wholeness, to be seen and to build it. So if you look at this and you're like, I either am only surrounded by people that I pay, right? Some of our business leaders, you spend a lot of time, or people that are connected to me by blood, then it becomes a space. And I know for Sarah and I, it's been huge. So it's something we're both super, super passionate about. Yeah, this was so fun. And I think it's a hard one for me. And yet I know it has actually unlocked such deep joy. And so we want to encourage you to harness this power of authenticity and vulnerability, which allows you to lean in to your strengths, to discover and ask for what you need, and ultimately to develop, to enhance that support system that's going to help you do that. And every time you do, you give yourself permission and others to continue to race towards that joy. And ultimately, that joy is going to allow you to have a big business, and most importantly, an even bigger life. Thanks, guys. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.